Angela Monroe walked through the large doors of Atlanta International Airport with a smile on her face. She was dressed in a navy blue blazer, neat black slacks, and low heels. Her hair was tied in a soft bun, and her silver earrings sparkled under the airport lights. She pulled her small suitcase behind her and clutched her leather handbag as she made her way to the gate. Today was an important day. She was flying to New York for a big charity event, where she was one of the speakers. Angela had worked hard for this moment. She had earned her seat in first class. She reached Gate 1B and saw people lining up to board. Angela stepped into the priority line, where the first-class passengers were being called. When it was her turn, she smiled and handed over her boarding pass and ID. The gate agent scanned it and gave a polite nod. But before Angela could take another step, a tall man in a pilot's uniform stepped forward. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said in a firm voice. "Can I see your boarding pass again?" Angela looked at him, a little confused, but she stayed calm. She handed the pass back.
The man,
whose name tag read Captain R. Dawson, studied the pass for a moment, then looked up and said,
You sure you're at the right gate?"
Angela blinked. "Yes, sir. This is Flight 718 to New York, correct?" He nodded slowly but didn't move. "And you're flying first class?" "Yes," Angela replied. She kept her voice polite. "Is there a problem?" Captain Dawson didn't answer right away. He turned to the gate agent. "Can you double-check her credentials? Something doesn't seem right." The gate agent hesitated. She looked uncomfortable but did as she was told. Angela watched as the agent pulled up the information on her screen. After a few seconds, she looked back and said quietly, "Her seat is correct. 3A in first class." Still, the pilot stood there, right? But double-check her ID too, just to be sure. By now, a few people in line were watching. Angela felt their eyes on her. Some were whispering. Others just looked surprised. She could feel her cheeks getting warm, but she stayed steady. She was used to moments like this, though they never got easier. She said softly, "Is there a reason why I'm being questioned, sir?" Captain Dawson replied, "We just have to be careful. Sometimes there are errors in the system." Angela paused. She didn't want to cause a scene, but she also couldn't ignore what was happening. She looked him in the eye and said calmly, "If there's an error, I'm happy to clear it up. But please don't treat me as if I'm not allowed to be here." The pilot said nothing. He turned and walked away without a word. Angela stood there, trying to hold her emotions in. She wasn't angry, not yet, but she was hurt. She knew what this was. It wasn't the first time someone had looked at her and assumed she didn't belong. She stepped aside and pulled out her phone. Her fingers moved slowly, and her voice was quiet when she spoke. "Babe, it happened again," she said. "Call them," that was all. Just 5 words. She hung up and took a deep breath. Behind her, passengers continued boarding. Some glanced at her with sympathy. A few avoided eye contact. No one said anything. Angela sat down on a nearby chair, her suitcase still beside her. She looked out the large window at the planes moving on the runway. The excitement she had earlier was now buried under a heavy cloud. Meanwhile, inside a quiet lounge across the country in Chicago, her husband, Marcus Monroe, was finishing a business call when his phone rang. He picked up, and when he heard Angela's voice, he didn't need to ask questions. He knew that tone. He'd heard it before, strong but tired. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't panic. Simply picked up another phone and made a call. "This is Marcus Monroe," he said. "My wife, Angela Monroe, is currently being denied boarding by one of our pilots at Atlanta International Airport. Please correct it, right now." The person on the other end froze for a second, then quickly responded, "Yes, sir. We'll take care of it immediately." Marcus hung up and sat back in his chair. His face was calm, but his heart was heavy. He had hoped they were past this. But clearly they were not. Back at the gate, just minutes later, a supervisor arrived. She rushed to the counter, spoke to the gate agent, then turned to Angela with a smile that seemed nervous. "Mrs. Monroe?" she asked. "I'm so sorry for the delay. There's been a misunderstanding. Please come with me." Angela stood up slowly. She nodded and followed the woman through the gate. As she walked past the pilot, He looked surprised to see her being escorted with care. He didn't say anything. Angela boarded the plane and found her seat 3A, a window seat just as she had booked. She sat down quietly, placed her handbag under the seat in front of her, and looked out the window. The pilot walked past her a few minutes later as he entered the cockpit. Their eyes met for a brief second. He looked away. Angela exhaled slowly and closed her eyes. She didn't want special treatment. She never had. She only wanted what she had paid for. She had earned respect. It wasn't about being the CEO's wife. It was about being a woman who deserved to be treated with dignity, like every other passenger on that plane. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Angela leaned back in her seat. She felt a quiet strength inside her. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't fight or argue, but she had made a call, and the world around her had felt it. Ready for part 2? Let me know. Marcus Monroe sat in a quiet corner of the Chicago Executive Lounge. The soft hum of conversation and the clink of coffee cups filled the air. He had just wrapped up a meeting with investors who were excited about the airline's new route plans. He felt a sense of pride in what he and his team had built. Then his phone vibrated. He saw Angela's name on the screen and knew this was not a friendly check-in. He stepped away from the table, out of earshot of the other executives. When he answered, he heard Angela's calm but tired voice. "Babe, it happened again," she said. Marcus knew exactly what she meant. He had heard similar stories from her before. He closed his eyes for a moment and took a slow breath. He didn't ask a question. He didn't show anger in his tone. He simply said, "I'm on it." He tapped his phone screen and called the head of operations at Monarch Skies. This was a number few people ever used. Within seconds, the line connected. "Hello, Marcus," said the voice on the other end. It was warm but held a note of caution. "I'm calling because my wife, Angela Monroe, was just denied boarding at Atlanta International," Marcus said. He kept his voice low so no one around him would peek. "Please, sort it out immediately. I'm watching." On the other end, there was a pause. Then the head of operations replied, "Yes, sir. Thank you for letting me know. We'll handle it right away." Marcus ended the call and leaned back in his seat. He stared out the window at the runways below. He thought about how Angela must be feeling, hurt, confused, maybe a little angry. He wished he could wave a magic wand and erase all such moments from her life. But he knew real change had to come from real action. Meanwhile, back at Gate 1 to be in Atlanta, the mood was tense. Passengers lined the jet bridge, eager to get to their seats. Angela sat in seat 3A, her back against the wall near the exit row. The flight attendant had just offered her a glass of water. Angela accepted it with a small nod. She watched as the cabin crew moved down the aisle, checking pockets and overhead bins. Every now and then she glanced at the cockpit door where she had last seen Captain Dawson slipping through. A few minutes later, the gate agent rushed onto the plane. She held her jacket tight around her. She looked nervous, like someone who had messed up an important task. She made her way to Angela's seat. "Mrs. Monroe?" she whispered. Angela looked up at her. "I'm so sorry for the confusion," the gate agent said softly. "The pilot didn't have the full information. It was a mistake." Angela nodded. She felt the weight in her chest ease a little. She had not asked for this kind of special treatment. She only wanted fairness. Flight attendant came by again and asked if Angela needed anything else. Angela shook her head and said, "No, thank you." The attendant smiled and moved on. Angela turned back to look at the other passengers. Some of them had turned their heads to watch the gate agent. A few smiled at her with sympathy. Others pointed quietly to their friends. She felt the urge to speak up for more than herself, to share how small moments of doubt could cause real pain, but she held back. She wanted to save her voice for the right moment later. In Chicago, Marcus opened his laptop to finish some paperwork. He thought about how to address this long term. He cared deeply about diversity and inclusion. He wanted to make sure every passenger felt safe and respected, no matter their race or background. He typed a quick note to the head of human resources, asking for an update on the airline's sensitivity training programs. He hit send and then closed his laptop. Back on the plane, the engines roared to life. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, offering a brief welcome aboard and wishing everyone a good flight. Angela listened politely. Gosh. She felt the plane roll forward, feel the push as they accelerated down the runway. She held the armrests lightly and watched the clouds blur past the window, even as the wheels lifted off the ground. Angela's mind was busy. She remembered a similar incident years ago when she had been questioned at another airport. At that time, she had felt small, like someone had tried to erase her achievements. She refused to let that feeling linger again. She opened her bag and took out a small notebook. She wrote a single line: "Stand firm, speak truth." Then she closed it and placed it back in her lap. A flight attendant approached to offer snacks. Angela chose a fruit plate and a cup of tea. She ate slowly, savoring each bite. The sweetness of the fruit reminded her of childhood breakfasts with her grandmother, who always told her to be proud of who she was. She felt a bit of that confidence return. When they reached cruising altitude, the cabin lights dimmed. A sense of calm settled over the passengers. Angela leaned her head back. She closed her eyes and thought of Marcus. She knew he was taking steps behind the scenes to fix this. That thought brought her comfort. Down in Atlanta, the operations team was in full action. The head of operations had called the station manager at the airport. He had asked for a full report on what went wrong. He instructed the gate staff to review their procedures and make sure no one else would face such treatment. He also sent a message to Captain Dawson's office, telling him to report to headquarters for a meeting. Captain Dawson had just completed his pre-flight checks. He sat alone in the cockpit, staring at the panels in front of him. He thought about the woman. He had stopped at the gate. Something about that moment kept nagging him. He wondered if he had done the right thing. Maybe there was more to the story than he realized. A little while later, Angela's phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus. "Everything's under control. See you soon." She smiled at the message. She typed back, "Thank you." She slipped her phone into her bag and closed her eyes again. She felt the gentle sway of the plane as it flew over the landscape below. Outside her window, the sun was dipping low, painting the clouds in shades of pink and orange. She took a deep breath and let the colors wash over her. Angela did not feel like celebrating yet, but she felt hope. She felt the power of one small act. Marcus's phone call ripple out into the airline system. It did not erase what happened, but it had set in motion a change. She thought about the flight attendant who had offered her water, the gate agent who would apologize, and even Captain Dawson, who would soon realize the impact of his words. None of them had meant to cause lasting harm. They had acted out of habit or fear. But now they would learn something new. They would learn respect. Miles away, Marcus closed his eyes and pictured Angela looking out at the sunset. He felt proud of how she handled herself with grace, strength, and quiet power. He knew there was more work ahead, but he also knew that this moment would light a path forward. On the plane, Angela opened her eyes. She picked up her notebook and wrote another line. "Change begins with a story." She closed the book and placed it carefully back in her bag. The flight continued toward New York, carrying new possibilities. And Angela, seated in first class, felt ready to turn her own story into a spark for something bigger than herself. ChatGPT said, "The hotel suite in New York was quiet when Angela and Marcus Monroe closed the door behind them. The soft carpet muffled their footsteps. Outside, the city lights blinked like distant stars. Angela set her small suitcase down by the bed and sank onto the plush armchair. Marcus went to the window, looking out at the skyline. He rested his hands on the glass as if he could feel the city's energy through it. He turned and saw Angela watching him, her face calm but serious. She patted the seat beside her. "Sit with me," she said gently. Marcus smiled and joined her. He took her hand, and they sat close together. There was no need for grand words. They both understood the weight of what had happened at the airport. They knew their next steps would matter not only for them, but for everyone who faced unfair treatment. Angela looked at Marcus. Her eyes were steady. "I don't want you to fire him right away," she said. Marcus raised an eyebrow in surprise. He gently squeezed her hand. "I thought you would want swift action," he replied.
Angela shook
her head. "That's not why I called you. I want him to see why his choice was wrong. I want him to learn, not just be punished. Marcus studied her face. He understood her well. Angela believed in second chances when they were earned. She believed people could change if someone showed them a different path. He nodded. "All right," he said softly. "We will meet him face to face." Angela leaned back, relief and resolve mixing in her expression. The next morning, they arrived at Monarch Sky's headquarters together. Marcus wore a tailored gray suit, and Angela chose a simple navy dress that swept just below her knees. They walked side by side through the polished lobby. Employees paused at their desks to say good morning, not knowing exactly why the CEO and his wife were there so early. Angela gave polite smiles, but she kept her focus on the meeting room ahead. Captain Rick Dawson sat behind a long mahogany table when they entered, his uniform pressed, his cap held in his lap. He looked up as Marcus and Angela closed the door. He stood immediately, straightening, and offered a stiff nod. Angela took a step forward first. She held out her hand. The pilot looked at it, surprised, then shook it. "Thank you for meeting with us," she said softly. She gestured to the chairs. He sat, and Angela and Marcus took their seats across from him. The room was still. A large window overlooked the tarmac where planes waited, but the three of them were in their own quiet world. Angela folded her hands in her lap and looked at Captain Dawson. "Want to understand what happened?" she began. Her voice was calm. "Why did you doubt me at the gate?" He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Ma'am, I followed protocol," he said. He ran a hand through his hair. "We get alerts sometimes when upgrades are not confirmed." "I was doing my duty," Angela nodded. "I understand protocol," she said. "But I was a confirmed passenger. No alert was showing on the screen, yet you still questioned me. You had every right to check, but you chose to keep me from boarding." Captain Dawson looked down at the table. "I don't know why. There was a feeling, something in my mind." He rubbed his forehead. "I'm not proud of it, but I guess I let my own ideas guide me. I saw a black woman in first class and I thought maybe there was a mistake." His voice cracked on the word mistake. Angela leaned forward, her eyes gentle. "Captain, you didn't know who I was? You didn't know I'm the wife of the CEO? You saw a person and decided she did not belong. How many people like me have stood there powerless to call someone higher up?" She paused. "This happens all the time, not just to me." He closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, Angela saw regret. "I'm sorry," he said. "I never meant to shame you. I never thought of the bigger impact." Marcus spoke then, his tone firm but fair. "Captain Dawson, we hold our team to high standards, safety, respect, inclusion. We want you to keep your job, but we also expect you to help us improve." Captain Dawson nodded. "I will," he promised. "Tell me what to do." Angela offered him a small notebook from her bag. Inside were notes she had kept since the flight. She handed it across the table. "I want you to read this," she said. "It's a record of what happened, how it felt. Then I want you to talk to our diversity trainer, learn more about unconscious bias. And I want you to share your journey with the crew." He accepted the notebook with trembling hands. "I will," he said again. Angela added quietly, "Your apology means something, but your actions will mean more." The pilot looked at Marcus. Marcus nodded. "We believe in growth," he said. "We also believe in accountability." That afternoon, Captain Dawson walked through the training center with Angela and the head of human resources. He listened as the trainer spoke about bias, empathy, and respect. He asked questions. He took notes. Angela watched him closely, her hope growing. She knew change took time. She also knew that real learning came when someone was open to it. Back in their suite that night, Angela and Marcus talked late into the evening. They reflected on the meeting and what it meant for the airline. Marcus said, "This could be the start of something bigger. A program that really helps people see beyond their first impressions." Angela smiled. "Yes," she said. "If we do this right, every passenger will know they matter." The next week, Captain Dawson sent an email to all staff describing his experience, his regret, and his commitment to change. He invited employees to join a new listening circle where they could share stories and learn from each other. The response was strong. Many signed up. Some shared their own moments of bias. Others spoke of times they had been on the receiving end. Angela saw that the pilot's choice to learn had ripple effects. She thought back to her grandmother's words, that understanding brings healing. Leave this small meeting had begun to heal more than just a single moment at a gate. It had begun to heal attitudes. As the days passed, news of Monarch Sky's new inclusion circle reached the media. They wrote about the quiet leadership of Angela Monroe and the courage of a pilot willing to admit his mistake. The story was covered not as scandal, but as hope. Angela read the articles over breakfast one morning. She closed the newspaper and looked at Marcus. He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. She whispered, "We did it." He nodded. "Together." And in that moment, Angela knew that one private conversation had indeed changed everything. The morning sun poured through the tall windows of the Monarch Sky's boardroom. Company executives, head office staff, and a few invited guests gathered in neat rows of chairs. At the front stood Marcus Monroe, dressed in a crisp navy suit. Beside him was Angela, in a simple white blouse and pencil skirt. The air hummed with quiet excitement and curiosity. Marcus stepped forward. He cleared his throat and smiled. "Thank you all for joining us today," he began. His voice was steady and kind. "We have an important announcement." He glanced at Angela, who gave him a small nod of support. Angela took a deep breath and spoke. "We believe every person who steps onto one of our planes deserves respect and dignity," she said. Her tone was warm but firm. "Recently I faced an experience that reminded me how easy it is to forget this truth." Allowing her words to settle. Behind them, a large screen lit up with the words, "Monarch Skies, respect in every flight." The audience watched as the new logo and tagline appeared. Some smiled, others leaned forward. Angela continued, "This simple phrase will guide our new policy. We'll make sure every passenger feels safe and welcome, no matter who they are or where they come from." She looked around the room, her eyes meeting many faces. "But we can't do this alone." Marcus stepped back up. "To put our words into action, we're launching a company-wide program called Respect in Every Flight." He clicked a remote. The slide changed, showing bullet points. Revised training, passenger feedback channels, diversity council, and regular inclusion workshops. The audience murmured approval. Our pilots, cabin crew, ground staff, and corporate teams will all take part, Marcus said. Training will cover unconscious bias, communication skills, and the stories of real passengers. He paused. We'll also create a safe way for employees and passengers to share their experiences, good or bad. This feedback will shape our future actions. A hand rose in the audience. The head of customer service stood. "How will we measure success?" she asked. Marcus nodded. "We'll track passenger surveys, staff feedback, and reported incidents. We'll publish our findings every quarter so everyone can see our progress." Angela added, "Transparency is key. We want to learn openly, admit where we fall short, and celebrate when we improve." She smiled. That is the only way to grow." The audience applauded softly. After the meeting, reporters gathered in the atrium outside. Cameras clicked as Marcus and Angela stepped onto a small platform for questions. The reporter asked, "Mrs. Monroe, why share your personal story publicly?" Angela took the microphone. "Because real change starts with real stories," she said simply. "When people see that I experience bias, they may realize it can happen to anyone. That awareness can open hearts." Another reporter asked Captain Rick Dawson to speak. Marcus nodded and called him forward. The pilot looked nervous but determined. He faced the cameras and took a breath. "I want to apologize again to Mrs. Monroe and to any passenger I've ever made feel unwelcome," he said. His voice was clear. "I have learned from this experience. I am now part of the Respect in Every Flight Council, where I will share my story and help train our crew." He looked at Angela. "Thank you for showing me a better way." Angela smiled at him. The crowd responded with supportive applause. The pilot stepped back, a bit more at ease now. That afternoon, internal emails buzzed through Monarch Sky's network. Staff read about the new program and Captain Dawson's role in it. Some wrote messages thanking Angela and Marcus for leading with courage. Others admitted they had faced awkward moments themselves and welcomed the new training. Across social media, news outlets posted headlines: Airline CEO's wife spurs major inclusion push and pilot apologizes. Joins Diversity Council. Many comments praised the airline's bold step. Some suggested other companies follow suit. Angela watched the posts from her office window. She felt a mix of relief and responsibility. This was only the beginning. Over the next few weeks, the first workshops began. Cabin crews gathered in a bright training room. Diversity trainer greeted them with a warm smile. Sessions included role-playing exercises, handling difficult conversations, recognizing assumptions, and listening with empathy. Pilot Dawson shared his story, talking about the moment he doubted Angela and how it changed him. His honesty moved many in the room. Ground staff held their own workshops. They discussed language barriers, disability access, and making all passengers feel included. Some employees shared personal experiences, stories of discrimination they had faced. The sessions were emotional and honest. Many left with new understanding. In a separate meeting, executives and managers formed the Diversity Council. Angela joined as a guest advisor. They planned outreach events in local communities. They partnered with flight schools to encourage more diverse applicants. They looked at hiring data and set clear goals for increasing representation across the company. Meanwhile, Captain Dawson began leading monthly listening circles. He invited staff to sit in small groups and speak freely. He said, "This is a safe space. Your voice matters." Employees who had never spoken up before found themselves sharing ideas and concerns. Some suggested small changes like renaming seating zones to avoid class-based labels. Others asked for clearer communication. About gate changes and boarding priorities, Angela received notes from passengers thanking her. One letter said, "Your story gave me courage to speak up when I faced bias on another airline." Another said, "I'm proud to fly Monarch Skies now." She saved these messages in a folder on her computer. Each one reminded her why she had chosen grace and learning over anger. Back in Atlanta, the original gate agent met with her supervisor. They reviewed the incident with Angela. The agent said, "I'm sorry I didn't speak up on her behalf that day." The supervisor replied, "We will train our team to support each other and every passenger. You will lead a brief session at your station, sharing what happened and what you learned." The agent agreed, feeling empowered to help others. One morning, Angela and Marcus boarded a flight together, unannounced. They sat in coach, laughing quietly with their neighbor. They wanted to see the changes firsthand. The flight attendant greeted them warmly, offering tea and snacks. The pilot made an announcement emphasizing a respectful journey for all. As the plane took off, Angela looked at Marcus and whispered, "This feels right." He nodded, happy to be on a flight where respect truly flowed. That evening, Angela wrote in her notebook, "Change is built from moments of courage, honesty, and grace." Today I saw it in action. She closed the book and looked at Marcus. They sat together at a small cafe table, sharing a slice of apple pie. Their journey had turned a painful moment into a powerful mission. Monarch Skies continued to grow and improve. Other airlines reached out for advice. Articles were written. In business, journals about their model. But for Angela and Marcus, the real victory was every day. A smile from a passenger. A sincere thank you from a crew member. A gate agent who spoke up. These small signs showed that respect was spreading. In time, Angela was invited to speak. At an industry conference, she stood before an audience of airline leaders and staff, and she didn't need slides. She spoke from the heart, about dignity, about the power of listening, and about how one conversation in a quiet meeting room had changed a pilot, an airline, and many hearts. As she finished, the crowd rose in applause. Marcus watched from the back, tears of pride in his eyes. Angela paused, looking out at the faces before her. She thought of the woman at Gate 1-B who had quietly asked for respect. She thought of the pilot who had listened and learned. She thought of every person who would now be treated with kindness in every Monarch Skies flight. And in that moment, Angela knew their work would never end, but the path was clear. once sparked, would guide them every mile of the way. The news spread quickly. Monarch Skies had launched its Respect in Every Flight program, and people wanted to know more. Angela Monroe decided it was time to share the full story. She sat at her desk in the airline's small media room. Looking at the video camera's red light, her heart beat steady. She knew this moment mattered. She began to speak in a clear, calm voice. She told how she had walked up to Gate 1 to be in Atlanta, proud in her first-class uniform, only to be stopped by a pilot who doubted her right to board. She described the hurt she felt then, the way her chest had tightened and her eyes stung. But she did not pause on anger. Instead, she spoke of her choice to call Marcus, her husband, and of his quiet power to demand respect, not revenge. She spoke. The camera recorded every word. She explained how Marcus had stepped in, not to humiliate the pilot, but to ensure that she was treated fairly. She talked about the private meeting in the headquarters conference room, where a pilot named Rick Dawson looked her in the eye, admitted his mistake, and promised to learn. She described how they had all executives, staff, and customers come together to build a new path forward. When she finished, Angela closed her eyes for a moment and breathed out. She smiled. It belonged to everyone who had ever felt unseen or doubted. She pressed the stop button and leaned back. The producer nodded and began to unpack the video files for editing. Within hours, the short film was live on Monarch Sky's website and social media channels. The title read, "A CEO's Wife Chooses Grace. How One Flight Sparked True Change." Comments poured in. Some wrote, "Thank you for your courage." Others said, "I wish all airlines would follow your lead." One message captured it best. "You showed that respect can win over power." Meanwhile, at airports across the country, staff began to notice small but powerful shifts. At Atlanta International, Gate 12B's team gathered for a morning huddle. The gate agent, who had once hesitated now, stood confidently in front of her colleagues. "Let's all promise to watch for bias, even the tiny kind that creeps in without warning," she said. Her team nodded. They practiced new greeting lines, using the names on boarding passes, making each passenger feel seen. On a flight from Chicago to Miami, a young black woman smiled as she showed her ticket to the gate agent. The agent greeted her warmly by name. "Welcome aboard, Miss Hendricks. We're glad you're with us today." The woman's eyes lit up, and she said, "Thank you." It was a small moment, but it felt big. Back at headquarters, Marcus and Angela watched these stories come in. They sat together in a small conference room filled with framed photos of planes and friendly staff. Marcus looked at Angela and said, "I'm proud of what we have done." She reached across the table and took his hand. "This is only the beginning," she answered. "We will keep listening." They decided to host a company-wide event later that month, inviting employees from every department. They called it the Circle of Respect. In a large hall near the main office, hundreds of staff members gathered. Some stood in uniform, others in office attire. The air buzzed with conversation. On stage, a banner displayed the program's logo. The chairs filled quickly. Angela stepped up to the microphone. She spoke without notes, sharing her own feelings of fear and strength. She said, "When I first faced that doubt at the gate, I felt small. But I also felt a spark, the spark of possibility, if we choose to see each other fully." She paused and looked at the faces before her. "Today, I see that spark in all of you." Marcus followed her, outlining plans for new training sessions, feedback tools, and community outreach programs. He spoke of mentorship for underrepresented groups in aviation, scholarships for flight school students, and partnerships with local schools. Their words drew applause. The event closed with a simple promise: to hold each other accountable and to treat every passenger with kindness. One of the pilots, a young woman named Sophia, stood up during the Q&A. She asked, "How can we make sure this lasts?" Marcus smiled at her question. "By keeping the circle open," he said. "By sharing stories, by checking our assumptions, and by reminding ourselves daily why respect matters." Sophia nodded, inspired. Shortly after, the airline introduced a new app feature called My Flight, My Voice. Passengers could share quick feedback on their experience, praising staff who went above and beyond, or noting moments where respect slipped. The data flowed into a dashboard that managers and executives could review. Positive stories were shared in company newsletters, and areas needing improvement were addressed in team meetings. In New York, Angela attended a panel discussion on leadership and ethics in business. Other speakers talked about profits, partnerships, and technology. When it was her turn, she told her story again, this time to an audience of CEOs and HR leaders. She spoke simply. Change starts with listening, listening without judgment, listening with empathy. She explained how her own moment of pain had become a lesson in courage and grace. After her talk, a businesswoman approached her. Story moved me, she said. I want to take it back to my company. Angela smiled and offered, please do. Respect is a choice, and it can shape our world. They exchanged contact information, promising to stay in touch. Back at Monarch Skies, Captain Rick Dawson continued his work on the Diversity Council. He had organized a new training video featuring real employees sharing personal stories of buys and kindness. He oversaw the listening circles where staff discussed challenges and solutions. He often thought of Angela's calm eyes and her words about dignity. He felt honored to help carry that message forward. Months passed. Monarch Skies rolled out uniform changes, name badges with pronouns, new boarding announcements that included welcoming remarks in multiple languages, and a revised first-class lounge decor that showcased diverse people in art. These changes were subtle, but they spoke volumes. The airline's customer satisfaction scores climbed. Employee engagement rose too. People said they felt proud to work there. On a crisp morning, Angela and Marcus boarded a flight to Seattle. They chose seats in coach, dressed casually so no one would recognize them. The gate agent scanned their passes with a warm, friendly smile. As they walked down the aisle, cabin crew greeted them by name. The pilot's voice over the intercom welcomed everyone by saying, "Welcome aboard Monarch Skies, where respect guides our journey." Angela leaned back in her seat and looked at Marcus. He squeezed her hand and whispered, "We did this together." She smiled and closed her eyes, letting the hum of the plane's engines soothe her. When the flight landed, passengers disembarked calmly. Some stopped to thank crew members. Others chatted happily about their trips. Angela and Marcus stepped off last. A young flight attendant held the door and said, "Thank you for flying with us." Angela met her eyes and replied, "Thank you for everything you do." As they walked through the terminal, Angela felt a deep sense of peace. Thought back to the moment she stood at Gate 1 to be hesitant and hurt. She remembered the burden of doubt, the sting of being questioned. She thought of Marcus's steady voice on the phone, of their private meeting with Captain Dawson, of the many small changes that followed. She reached into her bag and pulled out her notebook. On the first page, she had written, "Stand firm. Speak truth." On the next page, change begins with a story. She turned to a blank page and wrote one more line. "Respect is our journey's true destination." She closed the notebook and slipped it back into her bag. Then she stepped into the bright airport lights, ready for whatever came next. Because she knew that respect once shared could spark change anywhere, and that every flight could carry the promise of a kinder world.